Hey guys, we're going to be working on Pong 2.0 just a little bit, and then I'm going to take you into showing you a master remix and turning it into a two-player game. Let's take a look at something I added in real quick, and let's play that. You'll see that the token is actually changing each time it connects with the edges. That's just one of the things that you could do to make things more interesting, and I did it very simply. I didn't add any other variables. I didn't make a separate program for it. I simply went into animation, went to my giraffe token, and I added a frame with different pictures on it. I could even add a new frame, jump into the animals, and I could grab another elephant token in there, and now it's going to switch from all of these. And this is a frame, that's a frame, another frame. There we go, right? Okay, let's go back to coding. If your code disappeared, just scroll up and down and it's going to come back in. I didn't add but one line of code, well, two lines. I tried to start it out as Pong set frame to 0, but you'll see it flashes at the beginning, so I haven't gotten that perfect. And I've also gone way down here into my edge noise function, so if Pong bounces off edges, it plays a noise and it changes the Pong to the next frame. Pretty easy, right? So now I've got it going from one to the next to the next. Doesn't change when it hits the platform, although it could. So I didn't make a big huge change within here, but I piggybacked off of some of our interactions and made a new thing happen. Think about it. Add some interesting things in that you could do. Like, what if every time we hit the platform to get a score, what if we scaled down or shrunk the width on our platform? Simply, you would just go down into one of these already happening occurrences and say, if Pong bounces off a platform, something else would happen. There's an infinite variety of things that you could start putting in here pretty easily. But now we're going to jump. We're going to change our game. We're going to leave a lot of the things the same, the interactions the same, but we're going to transform from a single-player game, to a two-player game. Now we've got lots of things happening here. Okay, and you notice I already had a mistake I saw up there. No, maybe not. But here we go. Don't wipe out your game. Don't go back and create a new one. Simply click on Remix. Once you click on Remix, I renamed it to two-player Pong. Okay, so jump on in there, change your name. That way you can find what you're looking for and you know the difference. I'm not going to walk you through every single thing that I did to make this happen. I'm going to show you my code to the side, and you can start to change your code to make it the same. Oh, and by the way, you don't have to make it the same as mine. As long as it functions, coding doesn't need to be exactly the same as anybody else's. However, we started with the comments in here because we need to organize. And boy, I tell you, when you switch over to this, you really need to organize. We had to label all of our variables exactly the same. We had to label our background and our Pong and our platform and all of that. When you get here, you've got several different pieces that you're putting into play, and you need to organize, you need to separate things out, and you need to label it clearly. All right? That's going to be our biggest challenge in making this happen. So, back on Pong, I had some simple variables. I only have to keep track of one score. Only have to keep track of one lives left. But over here in Pong 2, I'm declaring my variables differently. I have to have player 1 score, or P1 score, or player 1 lives, or P1 lives. I'm labeling everything with a player 1 or a player 2 at the beginning, and I'm simply saving time and calling it P1 or P2. Now I know that you can call it anything that you want, but I would recommend doing something to where you're identifying what is player 1, because when you get farther into this program, it gets a little bit hairy. So go ahead and get this in. I started my score out at 0, my lives out at 5. I still have my zoom in and my player 2 and player lives and scores. I did my create edges just the same. I created my background sprite just the same. I created my Pong object just the same. But now here's where it gets different. If you'll notice over here, I have a platform on both sides, so I can't name it platform. I'm going to name it player 1 and player 2. Player 1 is going to be on the left, player 2 is on the right. That's normally what happens in a game. They start out from the left to the right, and player 1 is on the left. So I designed everything around player 1. I went into my animation, and I changed the layout and which direction it was facing. If I turned it up, then I would have I'll show you that real quick. I would have a platform that just doesn't look quite right. So I went ahead and I got into my changing the rotation of the object. Now it's facing the direction I want it to face. I go back in, and there we have the green on the inside, which is where I wanted it. So you're going to have to make some changes like that. But here's what I set up for player 1. This is how I brought it in. I did the same picture, and then I brought all my player 1 attributes. I didn't leave things separated. I did everything with player 1 right in order. This helped me code it correctly and figure out where my problems were when I was first playing my game. You're welcome to pause your video and put out your code just like this. I'm not going to waste time bringing everything in. You've already seen how to put this in. You know what to do. You can also see that I created my wall. I didn't call it ground anymore because it's on the side. So I called it wall. Player 1 wall. So my walls used to be the ground. And I created my sprite at 0, 200. 0 is going to be on the very left. That's the X 0 right there. Do you see that? Turned into a 0 right on the edge. And then I set the animation how I wanted it. I changed my height to 400 because the bottom is 0, and you get way up here into, well, you got 0 up there and 400 down here for Y. So I changed my height to 400, and I changed my width to being very narrow, which is different than we had the platform set before. So there's my player 1 attributes. Let's come down to all things for player 2. I did the same thing. I'm not going to talk you through every little bit, but notice I put my player 2 wall on the very right-hand side with the 400. I also did the height and width differently as well. My Pong attributes, the same, except you'll see I added the set frame to make that neat little change between the different frames. And you should be fine with your collider for your Pong set to circle, but your other player 1 and player 2 should be a rectangle. Now here's something that gets a little bit different, and you'll have to add this as you go through. And we'll talk a little bit about order after a bit, because some things weren't working right until I reordered them into a way that would make it work. But you'll see that I have all sorts of functions happening in here. Player 1, key commands, player 2, game over player 1, game over player 2. And I took out all these red pieces from the inside. I brought them out of the main program, put them into a function, named them edges and walls, and this is where I told the Pong to bounce off the edge, bounce off player 1, bounce off player 1 wall, bounce off player 2 wall, the whole business. Okay? There are ways to group things to where you can tell it to Pong bounces off any of these things, but I didn't cover groups in this one because we restructured everything so intricately. But you can see what I've got happening here. And don't forget, you have to bring edges and walls into your game. All right, let's go to show score. This got a little bit more complicated, and yes, you can pause it and you can go ahead and copy the same thing that I've got right here. I had to do a lot with text. Player 1 score, bring in the variable for that score. Player 1 lives, bring in the variable. Don't forget, you can have the same text, but when you're bringing in the variable, it doesn't have any quotations around it. So I brought in player 2 score and player 2 lives. Okay? Now let's go down here a little bit. I added a few comments in here. And you'll also notice I'm telling if Pong bounces off player 1, do these things. And I referenced my new names of my score, not just score, but player 1 score, and added a 1 to player 1 score. That's my separate variable. Added a sound in. And here's another big change we brought in. If it bounces off a player 2, you do the same thing. Here's my variables, and here's my playing sound. Now I have function, player 1 key commands. Here's what I did with player 1 key commands. Because the player 1 is on the left, I used the A and Z key. If you were to go and bring in this command and you were to scroll down, Z is not listed. They're not going to list every single key. All that you have to do is do a quotation, put the letter of the key that you want it to use, quotation, and that's the key it'll go to. A and Z is a pretty common up and down key on the left side of the keyboard, so that's why I'm using that. So everything is player 1. Key A is down, goes to the left and to the right. Key A is up, goes back to 0. Same thing with the Z key. And I had to add player 2 key commands. Same thing. But I'm doing the up and down arrows because player 2 is on the right side. I left this space button in, and I'll probably take it out before I play with anybody. Make sure that you take this out so it doesn't work, because if somebody does press, it's a cheat code. But that'll help us get to the end of the game really quickly, and we can show you that game over works, and we'll come back and take that out in a minute. Lives math. That's the original thing that I called it, but notice I added another if statement. If it bounces off a player 2 or player 1, goes back to the right variable and subtracts 1. Okay, I add the comment at the bottom on that one. Player 1, game over. If player 1 is less than or equal to 0, game over just like we did before. We set the Pong back to 0, velocity back to 0 on both the X and the Y. We moved it back to the center. We brought in the game over pick, and we made it zoom in. And we called zoom right there. Now I virtually copied it by placing the same commands in. Player 2, game over. Same thing that happened here. Brought everything in the same, but I was referencing player 2 lives. All right, come on down here, edge noise. And this was the same as the beginning. If Pong bounces off edges, play that sound, and then I said next frame. That'll change your frame of your character, of your token. Function with zoom, same thing. Okay, let's go back up here to the middle. Now, I suppose you've been pausing this video and making sure that your coding is either the same or similar to mine, because I'm not going to sit back and say, now bring this in, bring that in. That's going to take way too long on a game like this. But here is where I was struggling, because when I would play it, things would happen, but my math wasn't occurring, or my noises weren't occurring. it would bounce off the wall and or off the edges, and then sometimes it would make a noise and sometimes it wouldn't. Or sometimes it would hit the platform and add one, and sometimes it didn't. So your order here is very important. I ended up putting the order like this: the lives math, then the noises, then the Pong math, then the edges and walls, and I found that no matter how I ordered it, the show score and the key commands and the game overs were pretty okay, being towards the bottom of the order. Because what it's doing here is it's saying, all right, I'm setting up the game. This is how I'm loading the game. All right, what's first? Okay, background yellow. And then it's going to start doing the math. It's going to check the math. Is it hitting the edge? Then is it going to, and keep on going, working itself through here. And we didn't seem to have to piggyback it off of each other. It seemed to work okay in this order, but you might have to play around with this order if you're getting some errors in your program. Now let's take a look and see if everything is working. So I've got everything moving up and down. I kind of turned the sound off there for a minute. And it's important to see, does my A and Z keys move? Okay. Everything seems to be functioning. I've got scores happening. Does it score? Yep, it moves up. Oh, look at that. I'm losing lives over on the side. Okay. Oh. My player 2 lives went to 0, brought in game over. We can still see everything up here, so we can say, oh, look at that, player 1 got score, and the whole business, okay? In fact, that says score. I wonder if I said score there. I bet my side needs to be moved in a little bit more. I'm going to change that to a 25, which I bet will change everything around. Yep. I got to move things around a little bit, but there's some tweaking that you can go ahead and work on. Let's see, let's go up to 85 on that. Let's see if we can just get it quickly. Yep, now you can see player 1 score at the top, but I'm still a little close, so you might need to do some adjusting. Again, if you need to pause the video, this is my variables. These are my edges. This is how we brought everything in. This is the functions, how I move things around. I'm not going to share this code with you other than on the video so that you can go ahead and take a look and see and build for yourself. All right. Good job, guys. This is a nice, challenging thing to work on. Go ahead and make a 2-player game. Good luck.